Have you ever noticed that there's different camps of Metallica fans and different camps of Star Wars fans? For Metallica fans, there's the camp that only likes the first 3 albums, maybe And Justice, but definitely not the Black Album. Then there's another camp who really likes the 90s era, including Load and Reload. And where do the post-Saint Anger fans fit in?
He's embarrassing.
In this episode, I'm going to spell out why I think there are those divisions and how parallels between Metallica fans and Star Wars fans can explain those different camps. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, Jon Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's riff of the week. All right, 11 Metallica albums, 11 Star Wars movies. This should be interesting and fun. Let's get started. Over the years of observing and being a part of various different obsessive fan bases, I've come to the conclusion that our entry point into a fandom really determines what kind of fan we're going to be. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I featured this black metal band called Lamentari on my YouTube Weekend Best New Metal Album show. Their latest album, Ex Umbra in Lucem, is sick. But after I featured them on the show, a philosopher friend of mine who's been a fan of that band for a long time messaged me and expressed his discontent with the new record. Now, I just discovered this band, so I've never heard any of their music before. I wasn't disappointed with the album because it wasn't possible for me to be disappointed because I had zero expectations going in. And that got me thinking about Metallica, because I think it's exactly the same with Metallica and Star Wars. Which movie or which album was your entry point? Because I think that will determine exactly what kind of fan and which camp you belong to. So let's start with the camp that I like to call the OGs. There's a generation of metalheads that's a bit older than me, and they discovered Metallica in the 80s. Their entry point was the first 3 albums, and to them, those are the only good albums. There's moments after the first 3 that they enjoy, but nothing will ever top that original trilogy. And who does that sound like? That's right, OG Star Wars fans. These are the people that saw the original Star Wars in the theaters, and they were blown away at the opening scene when that Star Destroyer just flies across the screen. Just like OG Metallica fans, for these OG Star Wars fans, nothing will ever top the original trilogy. They are the end-all be-all. Sure, there are cool moments that happen in subsequent movies, but the original trilogy is the pinnacle. And I understand, because both A New Hope and Kill 'Em All were groundbreaking. There wasn't any sci-fi like that before Star Wars A New Hope, and Kill 'Em All changed metal forever. They raised the bar for their respective genres. And just like me, I'll never be able to watch The Matrix again for the first time without knowing what The Matrix is. Nor will I ever be able to listen to that machine gun riff in 1 with virgin ears. These people were changed forever. But back to the subject at hand, in this OG fan camp, there might be some friendly debate amongst them about which one of the trilogy, which one of the originals is best. Some will correctly say that it's Empire Strikes Back, while other fans might argue that Return of the Jedi is best. And it's the same with OG Metallica fans. They might debate whether they prefer Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets. But one thing's for sure, they will all stand, shake hands, and agree on one thing. Nothing is as good as the original trilogy. And that leads me to discuss the next camp of fans. I'm talking about people that didn't get into Metallica until Enter Sandman took over the radio. I'm talking about people that went back and watched the original Star Wars movies after seeing The Phantom Menace. And I kind of count myself in that generation with a few caveats. I've said on this podcast many times that And Justice for All is my metalhead origin story. That's when I discovered Metallica. That's the one that did it for me. But I was a kid at the time, and this was actually several years after that album released. I saw the video for one playing late at night on MTV, and this was actually pretty soon before the Black Album dropped. So I see the one video, I get obsessed with Metallica, I search for this album and Justice for All, and shortly after that, the Black Album dropped and Metallica is now the biggest band in the world. That's kind of the same with Star Wars. I had seen the original Star Wars movies on cable television interrupted with commercials, but The Phantom Menace was the first time I was able to see a Star Wars movie in the theaters. And as a little kid, I loved it. I hadn't yet refined my palate. At that point in time, I didn't care about plot holes or character development or pacing or any of those other movie buff grading criteria. Space wizards with laser swords had big battles with robots and the most metal-looking villain of all time. And not to mention, Duel of the Fates might be the inner Sandman of Star Wars. Even OG Star Wars fans will agree that that fight scene was awesome. They may not like the movie The Phantom Menace, but they all agree that fight scene ruled. And it might be a little similar with the Black Album. The OG Metallica fans may not like the Black Album, but Sad But True is heavy. And just like the fight scenes were more epic in the prequel trilogy, the production on those 90s Metallica albums was clearly superior. And then there are the OG fans that, they might be okay with And Justice for All and the Black Album, they just can't abide Load and Reload. It's pretty similar with some Star Wars fans, Darth Maul was cool, they just didn't like Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and, Count Dooku was lame and unnecessary. And say what you will about those prequel movies, but they inspired the Clone Wars TV show. There's a whole generation of Star Wars fans who grew up as children watching the Clone Wars and the Rebels cartoon show, and to them, that is Star Wars. They may respect the origins, but that's their entry point. That's what they think about when they think about Star Wars. And then came the dark times.
Before the dark time. Black Album, fame, fortune, right? Saying anger, despair, misery, anger,
loss of revenue.
Right? Loss of revenue. No album sold. That's it right there.
After all the arguing between the OG Metallica fans and the next generation over the Black Album, Load and Reload, and after all the furious debate between the OG Star Wars fans and the Clone Warriors, they all stood together as one in unison and universally agreed. Rise of Skywalker is ass. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the next phase. Disney went on to buy Star Wars, and fans were curious with rabid anticipation about how Disney would steward their beloved franchise. And meanwhile, even Metallica went on to dislike Saint Anger.
Oh God, Saint Anger again. Oh, no. I dare you. Please, no more torture.
But Metallica was about to release Death Magnetic, and they promised a return to their heavy metal roots. And it was kind of the same with Star Wars. The Force Awakens was about to come out, and it was a return to form, a return to the swashbuckling adventure that was A New Hope. And yes, perhaps it was a retread, but fans were relieved that all the bloat and the silliness of the prequel trilogy was gone. And relieved is the right word, because most people don't regard The Force Awakens or Death Magnetic as bad. They just aren't our favorites now, are they? We were just glad that we didn't hate them. The Force Awakens was pretty cool, and Death Magnetic was heavy. Cool. Maybe we're back. So with eager anticipation, we awaited The Last Jedi. And I feel that fans are just as split on that movie as they are on Metallica's next album, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. And I have pretty much the same opinion about both works. These entries had some of the best ideas, and yeah, maybe the presentation was a little bit off, and they could have used a little bit of editing, but they also set up some of the most interesting things in their respective histories. I mean, for instance, The Last Jedi set up the idea that maybe the main hero doesn't necessarily have to be a Skywalker.
Let the past die. Kill it if you have to.
Maybe now we're free to tell some more varied and interesting stories. And Hardwired to Self-Destruct has some banger riffs and ideas too. I'm talking about the title track, Moth into Flame, Atlas Rise, Spit Out the Bone. We're heavy again, baby! But then we got 72 Seasons and Rise of Skywalker. Now, let me be clear, 72 Seasons is a far greater work of art than Rise of Skywalker with many more redeeming qualities. But I went to the theater, I saw Rise of Skywalker, and I walked out of there with a big smile on my face because of all the big battle scenes and the movie theater magic. But then, after I thought about what I'd seen and the honeymoon phase had kind of wore off, what a travesty. JJ ruined all of the cool ideas that Rian Johnson had set up. And did I need to see Palpatine again? I mean, they shouldn't have killed off Darth Maul early, and they shouldn't have killed off Snoke early either. And 72 Seasons not only did not kill the past, it went running towards it. And right now, while it seems like it's pretty unanimous that the sequel trilogies are the worst Star Wars movies, I wonder if in a generation or two, if there won't be some apologists for these movies, kind of the same way that there are now unabashed load and reload enjoyers like me. So here's what I think both Star Wars and Metallica should do next. It's time to stop making big projects. Just let Star Wars be what it is. You have this rich universe and deep talent pool to draw from. Let's tell some interesting one-off stories. I loved the Solo movie because it's a heist movie. No Jedi, no Sith, just a one-off fun time. And The Mandalorian rules too. What if they made a horror movie set in the Star Wars universe, kind of like the book Death Troopers? Or what about a buddy cop movie? The possibilities are endless. And one of these side stories wouldn't suffer from the high expectations that a mainline film would. And Metallica can do the same thing. Metallica has nothing left to prove. They've long ago established themselves as one of the greatest metal bands of all time, right up there with Black Sabbath, and nothing can knock them down from that perch. It's time for Metallica to start doing side quests. What if they put out a Southern rock album? I mean, was anybody mad at S&M 2? What if they did another garage album? Because not only do I think Metallica is one of the greatest metal bands ever, but they're also one of the best cover bands ever. Just because their magnum opus has already been released doesn't mean that they can't create fun, interesting new works of art. Let's get weird with it, y'all. Let's have some fun. Just like the new Star Wars movies had that cool scene where the big spaceship went into hyperspace and crushed the other big spaceship. Yeah, maybe the movie wasn't the best, but that scene was cool. Metallica still can make something like Lux Eterna. Yeah! So come on, y'all. Let's get weird with it. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.